The twins stood beneath the swaying Spanish moss, a cardboard crate at their feet, filled with fragile paper flowers, bent, some torn, all carefully crafted. A wrinkled sign propped beside them read in blocky crayon letters, "Selling flowers to help our mom." Johnny Whitaker paused mid-stride. He was late for his meeting across town, his watch ticking toward another overscheduled day. But the image, two small boys no older than 9, standing side by side in pressed second-hand polos and two big sneakers, stopped him cold. They didn't beg. They didn't shout. They simply waited. Gianni stood there a moment longer, his tailored shoes rooted to the brick path in Forsyth Park. Early morning light filtered through the trees, catching the soft edges of the flowers. Napkins dyed with food coloring, some shaped into roses, others into lilies. "Good morning, sir," one of the boys said, voice quiet but steady. "Would you like to buy a flower?" Gianni stepped closer. "What's your name?" "I'm Leo. This is my brother, Matteo." "Did you make these yourselves?" Matteo nodded. "We do it every morning before school." "They're beautiful." Gianni crouched, picking up a pale pink flower. It was lighter than air, fragile. "How much?" he asked, already pulling out his wallet. "Anything helps," Leo said. "Our mom, she needs medicine." The way he said it, measured, rehearsed, hit deeper than Gianni expected. He handed them a 20. Matteo's eyes widened. "That's too much." "No, it's not," Gianni said softly. "Keep the change." The boys both bowed slightly, a habit picked up from someone who'd taught them old-fashioned manners. As he turned to leave, flower in hand, something gnawed at Gianni's chest. He was used to walking away. He'd done it for years, with meetings, foundations, even people. But halfway across the square, he stopped. He glanced down at the paper flower, then over his shoulder. The boys were packing up. Their crate was nearly empty. Leo gently nudged Matteo's elbow, motioning toward the sidewalk. They disappeared around the fountain, headed somewhere off the beaten path. Gianni exhaled slowly. A minute later, he was following them. He kept his distance, a silent figure in charcoal gray, moving past joggers and dog walkers. Savannah's streets wound tight, brick-lined and secretive, like the city didn't mind keeping things hidden. The boys weaved between townhomes and narrow alleys until they turned down a quiet lane, one he wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't been watching. They slipped through a rusted iron gate, vanishing behind an old white carriage house tucked behind a larger Victorian. The wood was weathered, the paint peeled at the corners. Curtains fluttered in a broken window upstairs. Gianni stood just beyond the gate, unsure what he was doing. He should leave. This wasn't his world. It never had been. But then he heard it, a cough, low and ragged. Then a voice, young and urgent. "Hold her up, just a little more. I've got the water." Gianni moved closer. Through a crack in the window, he saw the two boys helping a woman, thin, pale, younger than he expected, sip from a plastic cup. She looked too tired to speak, her eyes sunken but kind. Leo brushed her forehead with the back of his hand. "We got enough for the pills, Mama," he whispered. "You just gotta hold on a little longer." Gianni stepped back from the window. His heart beat heavier than before. Back on the sidewalk, he stared at the crumpled flower in his hand. Something in him shifted, quiet but certain. He opened his phone, scrolled to a contact saved under Savannah House, Dottie, and called. "Mr. Whitaker?" the voice answered, crisp with age and hospitality. "Miss Dottie, I need a favor." "Is this another last-minute meeting or something more complicated?" "I'm sending over 2 boys. They'll need some clean clothes and something hot to eat." A pause. "What about their mother?" Gianni looked back toward the carriage house, toward the window with its flickering curtain and frail shadow. I'll take care of her." Gianni returned an hour later, this time with his driver and a quiet knock at the door. He expected hesitation. But when the boys opened it and saw him again, there was only surprise. And something else. Hope, maybe, or disbelief. Bailey Morales was too weak to protest. Her voice came in a whisper as Gianni introduced himself, kneeling beside her modest bed. "Why would someone like you help someone like us?" He didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was the way Leo held her hand, like he was trying to keep her here with nothing but willpower. Maybe it was how Mateo sat quietly by her feet, ready to help but afraid to speak. Or maybe it was the flower, still in his coat pocket, that reminded him of something he couldn't name. He reached gently for her hand. "You need rest. Let me help with that part." Bailey blinked slowly, eyes shimmering. "I don't want them taken away." If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. "They won't be," Gianni said. "Not on my watch." He looked to the boys. "You two ever been in a house with a chef who knows how to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs?" Mateo's eyes lit up. "Real ones?" Gianni smiled for the first time that day. "You tell me tomorrow." As the boys packed up their tiny bag of clothes and paper scraps, Bailey's hand brushed Gianni's arm. "Thank you," she murmured. Gianni didn't respond. He simply nodded and stood. Outside, as they pulled away in the town car, Mateo turned to his brother. "Do you think Mama will get better?" Leo held tight to the flower Gianni had returned to him. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe this time something's different." Gianni didn't look back, but he kept the window open the whole ride home. The scent of paper roses lingered, soft and strange, like something about to bloom. The rain had tapered to a fine mist by morning, casting a silvery hush over the streets of Savannah. In the quiet warmth of the Whitaker estate, the usual stillness was gone, replaced by the soft shuffle of small feet and the low hum of voices that didn't belong to staff or executives. Gianni stood by the tall windows in his study, coffee untouched in his hand. Outside, the garden looked washed and clean. Inside, he felt anything but. He could hear them down the hall, the boys, Leo asking about pancakes, Mateo asking if the garden was really theirs to explore. It had been less than a day since he brought them here, and already they'd softened the corners of this house with something he couldn't define. Miss Dottie appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "They asked if you were a movie star." Gianni blinked. "I'm not." "I know. But you've got the jawline for it." She tilted her head. "They're polite. But they look at everything like it might be taken away. Even the pancakes." He set his mug down. "Did they sleep?" "They didn't toss or cry, if that's what you're asking. But I heard whispering after midnight. Sounded like prayers." Gianni's throat tightened. Dottie softened. "They're good kids. Smart, too. You planning on telling me what's going on here?" "I don't know yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Then I'll keep the sheets warm and the pantry stocked. Just don't pretend this is temporary if it's not." She left him with that and the smell of syrup in the air. Later that morning, Gianni walked the long hall toward the guest suite, a quiet knock on the door letting him know he was coming. It creaked open a few inches. Leo peeked out, face scrubbed and serious. "Is Mama okay?" "She's resting, but I brought someone to check on her." In the main living room, a tall woman with cocoa-brown skin, wire-rimmed glasses, and a no-nonsense posture adjusted her bag. Dr. Jalen Lane didn't believe in formalities when someone's health was on the line. She greeted the boys first, kneeling to their level. "I'm Dr. Jalen. Your mom and I are going to talk a bit, but I'll need your help later. Deal?" Leo nodded. Mateo hovered behind him, unsure. Gianni watched the way she moved, gentle, efficient. He led her into the guest bedroom where Bailey lay propped up against pillows, eyes open but cloudy with fatigue. Bailey blinked at the doctor, then at Gianni. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said quietly. Jalen smiled as she approached. "Miss Morales, I'm here to make sure you don't wear yourself down trying to be superhuman. Let's start with your temperature." Bailey gave a tired chuckle, then nodded. Gianni took a step back to the corner of the room, watching without speaking. Her voice was softer than it had been yesterday. Her skin looked a little warmer, but her breathing still shallow. She wore the same clothes. Dottie had folded a fresh set beside the bed, but she hadn't changed. Like she didn't want to assume she'd be here long enough to need them. Jalen asked about her medical history, her symptoms, her stress levels. Bailey answered as best she could, her voice growing quieter with each question. "And how long have you been off medication?" Jalen asked gently. Bailey hesitated. "Since last fall." Gianni flinched. Jalen nodded, not judging. "Okay, that helps." When the exam was done, Bailey leaned back into the pillows, drained. Gianni approached slowly. "You didn't have to bring a doctor here. I didn't want to take any chances." She looked at him then. Really looked. "Why are you doing this, Gianni?" He could have said it was the right thing to do. He could have mentioned the boys, the flower, the way she looked when she tried to smile through her fever. Instead, he said, "I'm not used to seeing someone fall through the cracks like that. Not right in front of me." Bailey's eyes searched his face like she was looking for the catch. "We're not charity." "I know." "Then what are we?" He paused. "A situation I'm trying to do right by." Bailey gave a tired half smile. "That sounds like something a CEO would say." Johnny's lips quirked. "It is." Outside, the boys' voices echoed faintly from the kitchen, asking Miss Dottie about the garden pond and whether fish could live in it. Bailey closed her eyes for a moment as if savoring the sound. "I didn't think we'd end up here. Yesterday I thought I was going to die in that bed while my boys watched. You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let it happen." Bailey opened her eyes again. "You speak like someone used to control." "I am. But this isn't a boardroom." "No." His voice softened. "It's not." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "There's a garden out back," he said. "My wife used to grow lilies there. The greenhouse is locked, but the boys are welcome to explore. So are you, when you're strong enough." Bailey didn't answer right away. Then, "She liked lilies?" "They were her favorite. I used to run a little shop, tiny place, sold wildflowers and dried bouquets. I loved sunflowers." Her voice caught. "But I haven't touched one in years." Gianni looked back at her. "Maybe it's time." She nodded slowly, a tear threatening at the corner of her eye but refusing to fall. "Maybe." As he stepped into the hallway, he nearly collided with Jalen, who waited just outside with her notes. "She needs long-term care. We can't pretend otherwise." "I'm not pretending." "She'll need labs, meds, monitoring, and eventually she'll need peace." Gianni looked toward the kitchen, where the boys had just discovered a basket of oranges and were marveling at the juicer. "I'll handle the logistics." Jalen studied him carefully. "You do realize what you're stepping into, right?" "No," he admitted, "but I know I can't step back out." She gave him a long look, then nodded. "Then let's do this right." That night the house was quiet. No phone calls, no meetings, no stock reports waiting on his desk. Gianni stood at the garden's edge, watching the light flicker through the greenhouse windows. The lock hadn't been opened in 3 years. Inside, time had stood still. The smell of lilies and memories. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the paper flower Matteo had made, now a little bent from being carried around. He looked at it a long time, then set it gently on the stone ledge beside the door. Just for tonight, he let the stillness stay, but something inside him whispered he wouldn't keep the door closed much longer. The morning light spilled softly across the marble floors of the Whitaker estate, pooling in golden puddles at the edge of the grand hallway. The house, once silent and sterile, now pulsed faintly with unfamiliar rhythms. Whispers, the creak of small feet on wooden stairs, the clink of spoons in oversized mugs. Johnny walked slowly down the corridor, drawn by the faint sound of laughter. Not loud, not wild, just new. It curled around the corners of the house like sunlight chasing shadows. He stopped in the open archway to the breakfast room. Bailey was sitting at the head of the long farm-style table, her back straight but her shoulders still fragile. A shawl wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was pinned loosely, and though there were dark circles under her eyes, her color had returned. Just enough. Across from her sat Leo and Matteo, each building a flower from folded napkins and colored tissue that Miss Dottie had found tucked away in a cabinet full of forgotten party supplies. Bailey reached out to help Matteo crease a petal. "No, fold it at the base, sweetheart. There, see? Now it opens like it's blooming." Gianni didn't move. He didn't want to interrupt whatever quiet spell had settled in. But Bailey looked up. Their eyes met. Her smile was hesitant, but real. "Good morning." Johnny nodded. "Morning." He stepped inside, feeling strangely like a guest in his own home. "You look better today. I feel less like I'm going to fall over when I breathe, so I'll take it." He smiled, then turned to the boys. "What are we working on here?" "A dahlia," Matteo said proudly. "Mom showed us how." Bailey glanced at Johnny. "Your house has really nice napkins. I'll take that as a compliment. Also, your guest towels. I think they cost more than my first paycheck." He raised an eyebrow. "What was your first job?" "Florist's apprentice. I was 16. Got paid $5 an hour to strip thorns and sweep petals. Thought it was magic." Johnny pulled out a chair. "Sounds like it." Bailey looked at him carefully. "You ever had a first job?" "Stocked shelves in my uncle's hardware store." "Really?" He nodded. "In a suit and tie, no less. My uncle insisted on presentation. I hated it. Now look at you, CEO of everything. Ironic, isn't it?" Bailey leaned back, watching him. "Do you ever stop? Working, I mean." Gianni hesitated. "It's easier not to." "Easier than what?" He didn't answer. The boys continued folding in quiet concentration. The moment stretched just long enough to hint at something deeper, but it didn't linger. Miss Dottie appeared with a tray of warm cornbread and honey butter. "Figured y'all needed something sweet before life got complicated again." She set it down between them, then turned to Gianni. "Someone's at the gate. Woman. Says her name's Fatima Daniels." Bailey straightened. "Fatima?" Dottie gave a single nod. "You want me to send her away?" "No," Bailey said quickly. "She's my friend. From church." Gianni stood. "I'll walk her in." At the front of the estate, Fatima waited behind the wrought iron gate with a tote bag and a tightly wound expression. Her eyes darted around like she wasn't sure what she'd walked into. When she spotted Gianni, her mouth pulled tight. He opened the gate. "You're welcome to come in." Fatima didn't move right away. "Is Bailey really here?" "She is, resting, but better." Fatima stepped through, keeping a careful distance. "You're Gianni Whitaker." "That's right." She studied him. "People like you don't usually get involved, at least not past a press photo and a tax receipt." Gianni met her gaze. "And yet." That earned a twitch of a smile. "Fair enough." He led her through the garden entrance, letting her see the lemon trees, the trimmed hedges, the wide back patio where 2 small paper flowers sat drying in the sun. When they reached the breakfast room, Bailey stood up slowly. "Fatima," she whispered. Fatima crossed the room and hugged her carefully. "I didn't know what happened. You weren't answering. I came by, but the house was locked. I thought—" She pulled back, blinking fast. "I thought I lost you." Bailey held her friend's hands. "I didn't mean to scare you. Everything happened fast." Fatima looked around. Clearly. Bailey's voice softened. "He found us. The boys were selling flowers again. Gianni helped. That's why we're here." Fatima turned her attention to him again. "And what do you want out of this?" Gianni answered without flinching. "Nothing. But I don't plan on walking away either." Fatima tilted her head. "You sure that's not more dangerous?" The room went quiet. Bailey exhaled. "He's not like that." Fatima looked at her. "How do you know?" "I don't. But I know what it felt like when someone finally stayed." The tension in the room shifted, not gone, but acknowledged. Gianni stepped back to give them space, nodding to Miss Dottie, who caught his glance and steered the boys into the hallway with the promise of fresh jam. He lingered at the edge of the room. He could hear Bailey's voice, low and steady, recounting the days since she collapsed, the ride to the clinic, the paper flower that started everything. Fatima listened in silence, her arms crossed but her face softening. When Bailey finished, Fatima let out a breath. "I don't trust easily," she said. Bailey reached for her hand. "Neither do I. But I think we might be okay now." Gianni turned quietly and walked back down the hallway, back to the greenhouse where the light filtered through the dusty glass. He stood at the locked door again. The flower Mateo made still sat where he'd left it. He rested his hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it. Not yet. Behind him, the voices of a family he didn't ask for were starting to sound like home. And somewhere deep in his chest, something was beginning to bloom. The afternoon sun slid across the estate like melted gold, warming every room it touched. Outside, the garden rustled with the sound of bees and the light scrape of Mateo dragging a small rake across the path. Leo sat beside the pond, sketching something on a notepad Miss Dottie had given him. Shapes of flowers, curls of vines, the soft line of his mother's eyes. Inside the house, Bailey stood near the kitchen window watching them. Her fingers pressed lightly to the sill. There was color in her cheeks again, a faint glow that hadn't been there a few days ago, but her shoulders were tense, her breath uneven. Johnny stepped in quietly, stopping a few feet behind her. He didn't want to break the moment. "They're different here," she said, still facing the window. He waited. Leo used to be so anxious, couldn't sleep, always listening for knocks at the door. Her voice caught. And Mateo, he used to hide when the phone rang. He thought every unknown number was someone coming to take him. Gianni moved closer. "They're safe now." "For how long?" she asked, finally turning. "That's what I keep asking myself. How long does something this good last before it slips away?" He met her eyes. "Why would it slip away?" "Because it always does." She paused. "And this house, this life, it's not ours." Johnny folded his arms. "It is right now." She let out a small laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "I don't think any of this is simple." Bailey leaned against the counter, arms crossed now, trying to hold something in. "Do you know how many times I've said no to help? Not because I didn't need it, but because the second you accept it, people expect something in return." He said nothing. "I've cleaned houses like this," she continued. "I've arranged flowers for women in silk robes who didn't even look me in the eye. I was always the help. So, no offense, Gianni, But you walking into that alley and buying a paper flower didn't erase that history. It wasn't meant to. Then what was it meant to do? Gianni stepped closer. His voice softened. I didn't help you because I wanted to feel good about myself. I didn't do it to fix you. I did it because I saw your boys, and something broke in me. Bailey's expression wavered. He hesitated, then added, You said this house isn't yours. But it's not really mine either. Not since... She passed. Bailey's eyes searched his. My wife loved chaos. She filled this place with laughter, noise, garden parties. I shut it all down after she died. I couldn't stand the echoes. Bailey's voice dropped. You loved her. He nodded once. With everything I had. Silence fell between them, weighted and real. She swallowed. I'm sorry. I know. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, Bailey said, That greenhouse out back. The boys have been asking about it. Gianni glanced toward the window. I haven't opened it in 3 years. Why not? He looked down. Because everything in there is hers. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Bailey stepped forward, her voice gentler now. Maybe that's the one room in this house that still remembers what it felt like to be alive. Gianni's gaze lifted slowly to hers. I'm not saying to forget her, Bailey whispered. I'm saying, maybe she left something in there that's meant to be shared, not locked away. Gianni blinked, then nodded slowly. I'll think about it. She smiled faintly. Good. Because Matteo already started drawing up plans for what he wants to plant. He chuckled. Of course he did. The moment broke just enough for the tension to ease, but it left something between them, fragile, unspoken, honest. Later that evening, as dusk draped the house in lavender shadows, Fatima returned with a bag of Bailey's belongings. She stayed only briefly, long enough to see the boys tucked in, their drawings of imaginary flower fields taped proudly to the guest room wall. As she left, she paused beside Gianni on the front porch. She's trying hard not to believe this is real, Fatima said. She's had a lot of people give up on her. I'm not going to. Good, Fatima said, but don't just show up. Show through. He nodded, and she walked into the night. Inside, Bailey stood by the stairwell, watching. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. You didn't have to promise her anything, she said. I wasn't promising her, he replied. She tilted her head. You know this doesn't make sense, right? You, us, whatever this is. It's not normal. Normal's overrated. She smiled despite herself. You're serious about this, aren't you? Gianni didn't hesitate. I am. Bailey looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she didn't seem afraid of the space they were standing in. Upstairs, the boys' laughter carried faintly through the air, followed by the sound of drawers opening and closing. Bailey's voice turned soft. You've got 2 little hearts upstairs who already believe in you. And their mother? She paused. I'm not there yet, she whispered, but I'm not running either. Gianni exhaled, the breath long and quiet. Then we're good, he said. That night, just before midnight, Gianni walked out to the garden alone. He stood before the greenhouse, hand resting on the old brass handle. The paper flower Matteo made was still there, now faded a shade lighter under the sun. He turned the knob. It didn't open. He'd locked it years ago, but the key was somewhere in the study. Still, just standing there felt like progress. Like the past didn't own him anymore. Like maybe, just maybe, it could become part of something new. From the window behind him, the glow of warm light spilled into the yard. And for the first time in a long time, the house behind him didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. The morning air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth as sunlight bled gently through the ivy-covered windows of the greenhouse. For the first time in 3 years, the key turned in the rusted lock. Gianni stood at the threshold, the door creaking open with a sound that felt almost sacred. Dust danced in the light like suspended memories. Inside, vines had curled around pots left exactly as they were, some broken, some still full of dry, cracked soil. A pair of garden gloves hung on a rusty hook. A ceramic watering can, hand-painted with tiny daisies, sat abandoned near the potting bench. Gianni's hand hovered over the handle. He didn't move. Behind him, Bailey's voice came soft, almost unsure. "You okay?" He nodded without turning. "It smells the same." She stepped closer, careful with her footing on the moss-covered stones. "Like thyme and jasmine. She used to come here before dawn," he said. Said it helped her think. She talked to the plants like they were old friends. Bailey looked around. It doesn't feel like a place someone left. It feels like she just stepped out for a moment. Gianni smiled faintly. "Yeah." The silence stretched. Then Bailey walked in. She didn't ask permission. She didn't tiptoe. She simply moved through the space with reverence, fingers tracing over the edges of planters, stopping at a tray of dried seed packets. "Sunflowers," she said quietly. "Your wife planted these? Number those are new. I think Matteo left them here last night." Bailey picked up the packet, read the faded label, then looked back at him. "They want to bring life into this place, Gianni. They don't see the past. They see the future." His chest tightened. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You don't have to be." Her voice softened. "But you have to stop locking the door." Gianni swallowed, his eyes scanning the room like he was trying to memorize every inch of it. Then he nodded. That afternoon, the greenhouse bloomed with sound. Leo and Matteo had declared it their official flower lab, and Bailey, slowly regaining her strength, helped them sort through old seeds, repot herbs, and organize the dusty jars on the back shelf. Miss Dottie brought lemonade and a half-laughing warning not to track dirt back into her clean kitchen, and Gianni, in rolled sleeves and garden gloves, found himself crouched beside a planter box, digging out dead roots with more care than he'd shown anything outside a boardroom in years. At one point, Bailey passed him a trowel, her hand brushing his. He paused. She looked up. There was something in her eyes, tentative, searching, but she didn't pull back, and he didn't move away. Their connection held for just a breath longer than it needed to. Later, as the boys dashed off to find stones for garden markers, Bailey stayed behind, her fingers stained with soil, her cheeks flushed from the sun. She sat on the stone bench beside the watering can and watched Gianni as he checked on the repaired window hinge. "You're different out here," she said. He glanced at her. "Different how?" "Quieter, softer." He gave a half smile. "I guess I forgot how to be that version of myself." Bailey studied him. "What made you remember?" Gianni hesitated. Then, "2 boys with paper flowers." Her laugh was low, warm. "They do have that effect on people." Gianni stepped toward her, leaning against the edge of the work table. "What about you?" She tilted her head. "What about me? You've been through more than most. And yet, here you are, building a garden again." Bailey looked down at her hands. "Because life doesn't stop just because it hurts. And because I want them to grow up believing that beauty can come from the broken places." Gianni's gaze lingered on her. "You ever think about what your life would have looked like if things had gone differently?" She met his eyes. "Every day." He nodded. "Me too." Bailey's voice dropped to a whisper. "But I stopped asking the what-ifs a long time ago. I started asking, "What now?" The quiet between them deepened. And it wasn't just comfortable. It was intimate. Johnny reached out, brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek with the back of his finger. Bailey froze. Not in fear, but in surprise. Her breath caught. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Because," he said softly, "I'm not used to looking forward either." She looked away, shaken but not distant. "This, whatever this is, it's too soon." "I know, but it's not nothing. I know that too." Bailey stood, brushing off her jeans. "We should check on the boys." He stepped aside, letting her pass. But as she reached the door, she turned. "Thank you for opening the greenhouse." He looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you for giving me a reason to." That night, after dinner, Bailey sat on the back porch with a cup of mint tea, the soft chirping of crickets rising like music in the humid air. Gianni joined her, a glass of water in hand. Neither spoke for a while. Then Bailey said, "I'm scared." He looked over. "Not of you," she clarified. "Just of wanting something again. Of letting myself believe this could be more than temporary." Gianni's voice was low. "I don't have all the answers, Bailey, but I know what it feels like to be tired of starting over." She nodded. "And I also know," he continued, "that maybe we don't have to do it alone." Bailey's eyes shimmered. In the stillness of the garden, two shadows sat side by side, just close enough to be noticed. And in the dark beyond them, the greenhouse lights flickered on, soft and golden, alive. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of the guest bedroom, spilling golden warmth across the patchwork quilt that covered Bailey's legs. She lay still, eyes open, not because she was resting, but because her mind wouldn't. The hum of quiet joy from the last few days lingered in her memory, like a dream she wasn't sure she had the right to keep. Downstairs, the faint sounds of breakfast being made, Miss Dottie humming a gospel tune, the boys chattering about garden worms, offered a strange comfort. But beneath that comfort was a tension Bailey couldn't shake. This wasn't her life. Not really. It was borrowed time, borrowed space, and she knew what happened when you let yourself grow too comfortable with borrowed things. She swung her legs out of bed slowly, moving with the caution of someone still learning to trust her own body again. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh laundry. Someone had opened the window. She didn't need to ask who. By the time she reached the kitchen, Leo and Mateo were already halfway through bowls of oatmeal topped with sliced peaches. Miss Dottie was wiping her hands on a dish towel and raising a brow the second she saw her. "You should have stayed upstairs." Bailey gave her a tired smile. "I needed to move." Miss Dottie motioned toward the stool. "Then sit. You move, I feed. That's the deal." Bailey eased onto the stool, gratefully accepting the warm mug of tea Dottie placed in front of her. The boys beamed. "We're going to plant sunflowers today," Mateo said. "Johnny said they can go in the back corner, where the bees live." Bailey blinked. "Bees?" Leo nodded. "He said we'll need them if we want real blooms." She was about to ask where Johnny was when the side door opened and he walked in, sleeves rolled up, phone tucked to his ear. "No, push the launch to next Friday. If they ask, tell them it's final. I'll send the update tonight." He glanced at her mid-sentence and gave a nod, warm and casual. Like it was normal now having her in his kitchen, sipping tea in bare feet. Bailey watched him move, commanding, collected, effortless. He had the kind of presence that owned a room without trying. But something in her stirred uncomfortably, because with every step she took deeper into this life, she couldn't help but wonder, when would the other shoe drop? He ended the call, dropped the phone on the counter, and poured himself a coffee. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she echoed, voice thinner than she intended. Gianni caught the hesitation. "Something wrong?" She hesitated. "Can we talk?" He looked at the boys, then at Dottie, who was already wiping her hands again. "I'll take 'em out back," Dottie said. "The bees won't wait." Once the door closed behind them, Gianni leaned against the counter. "All right, what's on your mind?" Bailey stared at the steam rising from her mug. "I'm scared I'm starting to forget how fragile this is." He didn't interrupt. "I watch them play in the garden. I hear them laugh like they haven't in months. And I want to believe this is our new normal. But that's dangerous, Gianni." He stepped closer. "It's not dangerous to hope. It is when hope makes you forget what happens when it all goes away." His expression shifted. "Is that what you think I'll do?" Bailey looked up, heart pounding. "I don't know what to think. You're a good man. I see that. But I've also seen how easily life changes for people like me. All it takes is one email, one meeting, one reason for you to pull away. I haven't given you a reason to think that." "No," she said quietly. "But I haven't given you a reason to stay either." Gianni stared at her, stunned for a beat. "That's not how this works. I'm not asking for pity." "I know that," he said, firmer now. "And I'm not offering it. Bailey, I didn't bring you here out of charity. I brought you here because something about you, about them, stopped me in my tracks." She held his gaze, but her walls were inching higher. "I'm just saying, I can't let myself fall into something that isn't built to last." "And what if it is?" he asked, stepping closer. "What if I'm not going anywhere?" Bailey's breath hitched. Gianni didn't reach for her. He didn't push. He just said it. "I haven't felt connected to anything real in years. You want to know why I stayed locked inside a house with memories and no color? Because I thought I didn't deserve to move on. Until I saw your boys holding paper flowers like they were the last beautiful thing in the world." Bailey blinked rapidly. "You can't fix us." "I'm not trying to." His voice softened. "But maybe we're both meant to heal here, together." The kitchen felt too small, too bright. Bailey turned away, hands shaking slightly. Gianni didn't follow. She needed space. He gave it. Later that afternoon, as the boys planted their first sunflower seeds with Mateo giving each one a name, Bailey stood at the edge of the garden, arms wrapped around herself. Miss Dottie appeared beside her. "You don't have to say it," Bailey murmured. "I wasn't going to lecture," Dottie said. "Just remind you. Sometimes good things stick." Bailey swallowed hard. "I want to believe that." "You will." Across the yard, Gianni knelt in the soil, helping Leo smooth the dirt over the seeds. He looked up at her once. Didn't wave. Didn't speak. Just looked. She held his gaze. And for the first time that day, she didn't feel the urge to run from it. A soft Sunday breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of fresh soil and lavender. The boys had just finished their morning project, placing painted stones around the greenhouse like a treasure trail. Each one had a flower name scrawled across it in bright marker. Hope. Growth. Light. Inside the house, Bailey smoothed the creases from the pale blue dress she'd borrowed from Miss Dottie. It was simple, flowy, and felt a little too nice for the kind of life she was used to. But it fit, and that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She glanced in the mirror, twisting a curl around her finger, then laughed under her breath. "What am I doing?" She wasn't the kind of woman who wore soft dresses and lingered in gardens. Not anymore. Life had made sure of that. Still, she didn't change out of it. She walked into the sunroom to find Gianni adjusting the collar of his crisp white shirt, standing near the French doors. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. He froze for just a second. "You clean up all right," he said, teasing gently. Bailey raised a brow. "That's your idea of a compliment?" "It's Sunday morning. I'm trying to be polite." She smirked, but the warmth in her cheeks gave her away. "The boys are ready. They've been talking about church all week." He nodded, straightening his sleeves. "Driver's out front. I asked Dottie to join, but she said the Lord hears her just fine from the garden." Bailey smiled. "That sounds like her." They rode in a calm silence, broken only by Mateo asking every 10 seconds if the church would have cookies after the service. The building came into view, an old brick structure with a white steeple, surrounded by azaleas in full bloom, the kind of place where people still knew each other's names and remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders. Fatima stood near the front steps, waiting. She spotted Bailey first, her smile gentle but wide. "I see you brought the whole crew." Bailey stepped out, smoothing her dress again like it might help her nerves. "We promised the boys." Fatima's eyes flicked to Gianni, who was guiding Leo out of the car with the same quiet focus he brought to boardroom negotiations. "He's really here," she whispered to Bailey. "He is." "And how are you?" Bailey hesitated, still figuring that out. Fatima looped an arm through hers. "Then let's start with worship and work our way from there." Inside, the pews were filled with soft murmurs and handshakes, heads turning subtly as the group walked in. Bailey felt them. Those glances, the curiosity. She wasn't used to being noticed unless something had gone wrong. But then someone waved. Then another offered a smile. And before she could think too much, Mateo was already slipping into the children's section, dragging Leo along. Johnny sat beside her, his expression unreadable. But his hand rested on the pew behind her shoulders, not touching. Just there. The service was simple. A local choir sang with conviction. The pastor delivered a sermon about grace being messy but real, and Bailey kept glancing sideways at Gianni, surprised to see how still he sat, how closely he listened. He didn't strike her as the church type. Afterward, as families spilled out into the garden, Fatima returned with a plate of lemon cookies and an eyebrow raised. "So," she said under her breath, handing one to Bailey, "am I imagining things, or is there something blooming besides the flowers out here?" Bailey snorted. "You're not subtle." "I'm not trying to be. You look lighter." "I don't feel lighter." Fatima tilted her head. "But you feel something." Bailey's expression softened. "I do." Across the garden, Gianni stood near the pastor, deep in conversation. Not talking business, just talking. He laughed at something, really laughed. Bailey stared at him. "He's not what I expected." "No one is," Fatima said. "That's what makes life interesting." But the moment, like all good ones, was interrupted by something Bailey hadn't prepared for. A woman approached, polished, poised, designer sunglasses, even on a cloudy day. Her heels clicked against the walkway like punctuation. She smiled too widely as she reached Gianni. "I didn't think you were back in Savannah." Gianni stiffened slightly. "Margot, I didn't expect to see you here." Margot removed her sunglasses slowly, eyes sliding over him, then past him, to Bailey. "Oh," she said, smiling tighter. "Is this—" Gianni glanced at Bailey, then back at Margot. "This is Bailey Morales, and that's her family." Margot's brow rose just a fraction. "Interesting." Bailey stepped forward, her expression composed. "Nice to meet you." Margot's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Charmed, I'm sure." She turned back to Gianni. "You're still full of surprises." He didn't respond, and Margot finally moved on, her perfume lingering behind her like a trail. Bailey waited until she was gone before speaking. "Friend of yours?" "Not exactly." "Old flame?" He hesitated. "Not important." Bailey looked at him unblinking. "If I'm stepping into a life that already has chapters written, I'd rather know what kind of story I'm in." Gianni met her gaze. She's someone from before, from a time when I thought success meant surrounding myself with people who said all the right things, but meant none of them. Bailey nodded slowly. And what do you think it means now? He didn't answer immediately. Then, I think it means being seen. Fully, even when it's uncomfortable. She studied him for a beat longer. Then maybe we're both learning the same thing. Later that evening, back at the house, Bailey found a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages of her book. It was Leo's handwriting. When the flowers bloom, they don't ask permission. They just open. She read it twice. Then she looked toward the window, where Johnny stood outside near the greenhouse, shirt sleeves rolled, arms crossed, head tilted back as he watched the sky darken. She didn't say anything, but she smiled. Because for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what might happen next. A gentle breeze swept through the courtyard, sending the scent of lemon blossoms drifting through the air. The greenhouse doors stood open now, sunlight pouring in through the glass like it had been waiting years to return. Inside, Bailey knelt beside Mateo, helping him transfer a delicate sprout into its new home. Her hands were caked in soil, her smile faint but present. Johnny watched from the edge of the doorway, arms folded, heart caught somewhere between contentment and concern. She was better, stronger. But the unspoken thing between them had shifted since church. Since Margot. He hadn't meant for it to sting the way it did. Bailey looked up, catching his gaze. "You're staring." He blinked. Guilty. She wiped her hands on a cloth and stood slowly, walking toward him. "Something on your mind?" "A few things." She stopped a step away. "Start with the one you're most afraid to say." He smiled, just barely. "You make that sound easier than it is." Bailey shrugged. "Fear's only loud when it thinks you'll listen." Johnny exhaled, glancing back toward the boys. "I got a call from my CFO this morning. They want me in Atlanta next week." Bailey's face stayed neutral, but her eyes flickered. "How long?" "Could be a few days. Could be more." He hesitated. "There's a board meeting. Some investors want answers about the Savannah property. About why I'm still here." "And what did you tell them?" Johnny's voice lowered. "That I found something worth staying for." Bailey's breath caught. She looked down at her hands, still stained with soil. "That's a nice thing to say." "It's not just something to say." She nodded slowly. "So you're leaving?" "I don't want to, but I have to handle this in person." She looked up. "Are you coming back?" Johnny didn't answer right away. Then he stepped forward and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "I've spent most of my life chasing things I thought mattered. Titles, deals, applause. And in the middle of all that, I forgot how to hold on to something real." Bailey's voice trembled. "You think this is real?" "Yes." His voice cracked. "Don't you?" She hesitated. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she whispered, "I want to." They stood there in the doorway, light between them, but something else too. Something heavier. A test neither of them had asked for. Later that evening, Bailey sat on the porch swing, legs curled beneath her. The boys inside watching a movie with Miss Dottie. The sky stretched pink and silver overhead, the air thick with the hum of crickets and the hush of questions she didn't have answers to. Gianni stepped outside, a worn leather duffel in his hand. "I'm leaving before sunrise. Figured I'd say goodnight." Bailey nodded. "Travel safe." "I'll call, every day." She nodded again. He walked down the steps but paused halfway. "Do you want me to say it?" She looked at him. "Say what?" "What this is, what you are to me." Her heart thudded. "No." He froze. Bailey stood slowly. "Not yet. Don't make this moment a promise you're not sure you can keep. Gianni's jaw flexed. I've never been more sure of anything. I believe you, she said, but come back first, then tell me. He nodded. And with one last look, so full it said everything he didn't, he turned and walked into the night. The next morning came too fast. Bailey stood at the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching the garden sway. The boys were still asleep. Dottie had gone to the market, and the house felt quieter, different. Fatima arrived just before lunch, arms full of groceries and stories. I thought I'd come early and distract you, she said. Figured you'd be pacing. Bailey raised an eyebrow. I'm fine. Fatima studied her. You're terrified. I'm not. Bailey exhaled. Okay, maybe a little. Because he left? Because it felt like something more. Fatima set the bag down and leaned on the counter. Girl, don't you know by now? The ones that feel like more are the ones that change everything. I don't know if I'm ready for everything to change again. You already changed. He didn't do that. You did. Bailey stared at her for a long moment. Then from the hallway, a knock. Not the front door, the side door. Bailey frowned. That's strange. She walked toward it, cracking it open. A tall woman stood outside, mid-40s, neat blouse, professional stance, a clipboard in hand. Bailey Morales? Yes. I'm Jessica. I'm with Child and Family Services. I'm following up on a flagged medical report. May I come in? Bailey froze. Flagged medical report. The words hit like cold water. She swallowed. Yes, of course. Fatima appeared at her shoulder, eyes narrowing. Is there a problem? Jessica gave a practiced smile. Just a routine wellness check. We were alerted after a clinic report listed untreated chronic illness in a guardian household. Bailey's voice dropped. The boys are fine. They're thriving. I'm sure they are, Jessica said gently. But I'll need to speak with them, and with you. Alone. Bailey's heart thudded in her chest. Gianni wasn't here. She was alone. But she straightened her spine, stepped aside, and opened the door wider. Then let's talk, she said, voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. Because whatever this was, whatever came next, she wasn't hiding anymore. Jessica's pen clicked softly as she flipped to the second page on her clipboard. The sound echoed too loudly in the kitchen, where Bailey sat stiffly across the table, trying to keep her hands from trembling. Outside, Leo and Mateo's laughter filtered in faintly from the greenhouse. Their innocence, so bright, so effortless, felt like a fragile thread stretching between two worlds. Jessica looked up. Bailey, I want you to know this isn't an investigation. It's a wellness check. Standard protocol when long-term health conditions are flagged alongside primary caregiving. Bailey nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. Jessica studied her for a moment. How long have you been the boys' sole guardian? Since their father left. 4 years. And there's been no formal custody reassignment since? No. Bailey's voice softened. He disappeared. He never looked back. Jessica's expression didn't shift. She kept her tone neutral. Do you have current employment? No, but I'm recovering from a medical condition. Dr. Jalen Lane has been overseeing my treatment. Jessica jotted something down. Bailey tried to steady her breath. And the boys are safe, healthy. They're in a loving environment. I know it might not look... I'm not here to judge that, Jessica said gently. But when a parent has significant health challenges and no legal co-guardian in place, we have to consider long-term stability. Bailey's stomach sank. She looked toward the hallway, where the drawings the boys had taped to the wall fluttered in the breeze from the ceiling fan. One was a sunflower, another a stick figure of all 4 of them, her, the boys, and Gianni, smiling in front of the greenhouse. Gianni is part of our support system, she said quietly. He's not just a visitor. Jessica looked up. Is there a legal guardianship agreement in place with Mr. Whitaker? Not yet, but then we need to consider a temporary plan until one is. Bailey's voice broke. He's coming back. He'll help. Jessica's pen paused. We've seen good intentions disappear before. Bailey stood suddenly, unable to sit still any longer. She paced to the window, one hand pressed to the frame. I have fought for everything those boys have. Every meal, every doctor's visit, every pair of shoes. I may not have a title or a piece of paper, but I am their mother in every way that matters. Jessica's voice stayed calm but firm. And you may remain so, but if we're to ensure the children's stability, we need a formal review. A soft knock interrupted them. Fatima peeked in, her expression tight. Leo's asking for you. Bailey nodded, her heart thudding. I'll be right there. Jessica stood as well. We'll follow up next week. I'll also need to speak with Mr. Whitaker as soon as he returns. Bailey opened the door, trying to smile, trying not to let the dread show. Of course. As Jessica left, she paused at the threshold. You clearly love those boys. That matters. But the system doesn't run on love alone. The door clicked shut. Bailey leaned her back against it, the breath leaving her in one long, shaking exhale. Fatima approached gently. Want me to stay? No. Bailey looked up, eyes glassy but steady. I need to tell them myself. In the greenhouse, Leo was kneeling in the dirt, his hands cupped around a sprouting sunflower like it might slip away if he let go. Mateo hovered nearby, sketching something in the notebook Gianni had given him. Bailey walked in slowly, the scent of mint and soil surrounding her like a memory. Leo looked up. Who was the lady? Bailey knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. She's someone who helps families make sure things stay safe. Are we safe? Mateo asked, his voice too small. Bailey's throat tightened. You are. I promise, Leo frowned. Did we do something wrong? No, baby, she whispered. You did everything right. Mateo looked down. Is she taking us away? No, Bailey said quickly. No one is taking you anywhere. But even as she said it, the words wobbled under the weight of uncertainty. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep in the room they now called theirs, Bailey sat alone on the back porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The stars above felt too quiet, too far away. Her phone buzzed. Gianni. She answered immediately. Hey. His voice came through, warm but tired. Just landed. I'll be home by noon tomorrow. She didn't speak. Bailey? CPS came, she whispered. Silence. He exhaled. Tell me everything. She did. Slowly, carefully, with her voice breaking only once. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm calling the attorney tonight. We're not waiting. Gianni, I should have filed for temporary guardianship the second you walked through that door. That's on me. But I'm fixing it now. Her voice cracked. What if it's too late? It's not, he said, firm. I won't let it be. Bailey closed her eyes, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. I'm scared, she said. I'm not, he replied. Not of them, not of this. I know what's real, Bailey, and this, us, is real. Her breath caught. I'll be there tomorrow, he said, softer now. And we're not just going to prove we're a family. We're going to become one. She didn't answer right away. But when she did, her voice was steadier than it had been all day. Then come home. And somewhere in the dark, something finally steadied inside her too. The sound of tires on gravel stirred Bailey from her uneasy sleep. She sat up on the couch, blinking at the morning light that spilled through the tall windows, soft and golden. A moment passed before she registered it. Gianni was home. She stood slowly, her heart beating faster than it should have. She didn't bother fixing her hair or checking the mirror. Some part of her knew If he was here, none of that mattered. The door creaked open. Gianni stepped inside, still wearing the dark blazer from his flight, but his tie was gone and his eyes were tired. He froze when he saw her standing there barefoot, wrapped in a quilt, the house still hushed from sleep. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Bailey's voice broke the silence. "You made it." He dropped his bag at the foot of the stairs and crossed the room in 3 long strides before stopping just in front of her. "You called me home," he said softly. "Of course I came." Her breath caught. "I didn't know if you'd really—" "I would have run if I had to." She tried to answer, but the emotion caught in her throat. Instead, she just nodded, eyes glassy, her lips parting like she wanted to say something and couldn't. Gianni reached up and brushed his thumb along her cheek. "Bailey, I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not trusting it, for thinking it would fall apart." His hand dropped, and he took her hands in his. "You don't have to apologize for protecting yourself or your boys, but from here on out, you don't have to do it alone." Bailey's voice trembled. "They're my world, Gianni." "I know," he said. "Let's protect it together." She couldn't speak. She just leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest, and for a moment they stood there, still, quiet, steady. Later that morning, the house filled with sound. Leo and Matteo tumbled down the stairs, shouting his name like they'd been waiting months instead of days. Johnny crouched to meet them both, arms outstretched. "Did you bring us anything from Atlanta?" Matteo asked, grinning. Johnny laughed. "You mean besides emergency paperwork and a really good lawyer?" Leo looked confused. "What's that?" Bailey stepped in, crouching beside them. "It means Gianni's going to help make sure we stay a family." The boys went quiet, processing. Then Matteo whispered, "So we're not leaving?" "Not ever," Gianni said, placing a hand gently on each of their shoulders. "You're safe, and you're home." In the hours that followed, the house turned into something else entirely. The attorney arrived, a kind man named Whitaker, only half remembered from an old partnership. He reviewed every form twice, made the language simple, and walked Bailey through each signature like it was a ceremony. Fatima sat on the porch with a notepad, documenting phone calls from CPS and organizing medical reports from Dr. Jalen. Miss Dottie made too much coffee and muttered under her breath about people in offices who'd never grown a single thing in their life, but always thought they knew how to manage one. By late afternoon, the last form was signed. The boys sat in the hallway, drawing their names in bubble letters on the backs of old envelopes. On each one they wrote, "Home is where we plant our roots." Bailey stood at the kitchen sink, hands in the warm dishwater, staring out at the garden where the sunflowers had started to reach. Gianni came up behind her quietly. "You good?" he asked. She nodded. "Tired, but good." He leaned against the counter. "I didn't expect any of this when I came to Savannah." "Neither did I." He looked at her, something careful in his expression. "Can I ask you something?" She turned to face him. "You've let me help. You've trusted me. You've even let me plant flowers with your kids. But I don't want to just stand at the edge of your life, Bailey. I want to be part of it." Her eyes searched his. "Not just when things are hard, not just because I showed up, but because I care. Deeply." She swallowed hard. "Tell me," he said gently, "is there room for me in this family? For real?" The question hung there. Bailey's fingers curled around the towel in her hands. "There's not just room," she said, voice shaking. "There's a space we didn't even realize was missing until you filled it." Gianni stepped closer. "So, this isn't just temporary." She shook her head. "It's not." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then let's build it. he whispered, from the ground up. No secrets, no pretending it's not real. She nodded, tears pooling but not falling. I want to start again, she said, voice low. Not from where we were, but from where we are. Then say it, he murmured. Say we're a family. Bailey took a breath. We're a family. Gianni smiled, wide, full, the kind that reached all the way to his eyes. And just beyond them, in the hallway, Leo whispered to Matteo, Did you hear that? Matteo grinned. Yeah. Leo nodded, clutching the paper flower he'd saved from that first day in the park. We're not just visitors anymore, he whispered. No, Matteo said softly. We belong. The wind shifted that morning, not just in the garden where the sunflower stalks leaned as if listening, but in the air between people, in the rhythm of the house. Bailey knew something felt off the moment she opened her eyes. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums behind your ears and presses against your chest. She pushed back the blanket, her hand instinctively reaching for the soft weight of Matteo's sketchbook at the foot of her bed. But it wasn't there. Neither were the boys. She rose quickly, slipping her arms into a cardigan as she stepped into the hallway. The scent of cinnamon drifted faintly from the kitchen. Miss Dottie's doing, no doubt. But the house was still, no laughter, no chatter, no patter of feet. Then she heard it, a faint cough, sharp, repeated, coming from the boys' room. Her feet moved faster than her thoughts. When she reached the doorway, she found Leo curled under the blanket, his small body tense, his face flushed with fever. Matteo sat beside him on the edge of the bed, eyes wide and wet. He said he didn't feel good last night, but he didn't want to worry you. Bailey dropped to her knees beside the bed, brushing the damp curls from Leo's forehead. Sweetheart, she whispered, why didn't you tell me? Leo tried to speak, but his voice came out dry and cracked. You've been tired, Mama. I didn't want to make it worse. Bailey's chest ached. She reached for his hand, holding it gently in both of hers. You will never be a burden to me. Do you understand? He nodded weakly. Miss Dottie appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. Call Jalen, Bailey said, already smoothing the blanket around Leo's shoulders. Now. 10 minutes later, Dr. Jalen Lane walked through the front door, her bag in hand. No white coat, just rolled sleeves and calm precision. She knelt beside the bed, checking Leo's pulse, his breathing, his temperature. She asked quiet questions, and Bailey hovered nearby, answering when Leo couldn't. Gianni arrived mid-exam, stepping into the room with a quiet urgency. Bailey turned to him, voice breaking. He didn't say anything, he just didn't want to be a problem. Gianni's expression twisted into something painful. He's not. Dr. Lane stood, turning to them both. It's a viral infection. Not life-threatening, but his body's worn down. He's been holding stress, not sleeping well, and trying to stay strong for you. Bailey closed her eyes. I'll leave medication and fluids, Jalen continued. But what he really needs is rest, and to feel like he doesn't have to carry anyone. Gianni sat down beside the bed, placing a hand gently on Leo's. You don't have to be the strong one all the time, okay? Leo's lips parted. But you're busy. Mama's tired. I thought, you don't have to think about us, Bailey said softly. That's our job. Tears pooled in Leo's eyes. Are you going to leave? No, Gianni said immediately, his voice firm. Never. Bailey stood frozen in the hallway as Jalen gathered her things. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have seen it. Jalen paused. Bailey, you've been holding your world together with thread. You don't have to apologize for blinking. Bailey looked down at her hands. I thought when Gianni came back, maybe things would feel easier. Sometimes, Jalen said, it's not about easier. It's about letting someone else help carry the weight. That night, Gianni sat on the floor beside Leo's bed, reading from a worn children's book. Matteo had fallen asleep against Bailey's side in the rocking chair. Outside, the sky cracked with distant thunder, the kind that never quite turns into rain. After closing the book, Gianni reached down and brushed Leo's hair back gently. I thought you might be tired of me reading. Leo's voice was a whisper. I like when you do. Gianni smiled. Then I'll keep going. Bailey watched from the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. He looked up at her. Want to trade shifts? She nodded and moved toward the bed, easing into the space beside Leo as he closed his eyes. Gianni stood and stepped into the hallway, waiting until she followed him. When they reached the living room, she exhaled slowly. I thought we were getting a handle on everything, she said. But seeing him like that, I know. I don't want to fail them, Gianni. You won't. Bailey looked at him, her voice trembling. You talk like you know we'll make it, like there's no chance we'll fall apart. Because I won't let us, he said. Not when we've come this far, not when we're this close. Bailey looked away. And what happens when the next thing breaks? What happens if Matteo gets sick? If I relapse? If the paperwork isn't enough for the state? Gianni stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Then we show up, again and again. That's what family does. She didn't answer right away, but after a long pause, she reached for his hand and held it tight. Then stay here tonight, she whispered. Not just in this house, in this mess, this uncertainty, this love. He didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere. And in the quiet that followed, surrounded by worry and warmth, thunder and trust, they stood still, right at the edge of something they could finally call their own. The sun climbed slowly over the horizon, spilling a soft orange glow across the kitchen table where papers had been spread since dawn. Legal documents, guardianship forms, custody statements. A quiet battlefield lined with signatures and intentions. Gianni stood at the stove, pouring hot water into a mug while Bailey sat at the table, barefoot, hair twisted into a loose knot, eyes focused on the page in front of her but clearly somewhere else. You've read that paragraph 3 times, Gianni said gently, setting the tea in front of her. She blinked and looked up. I just don't want to miss anything. You won't. Bailey picked up the pen, her fingers trembling slightly. This is real now, isn't it? Gianni leaned against the counter, his voice low. It always was. Outside, Leo was resting in the sunroom with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and a half-empty glass of juice on the side table. Matteo was curled beside him with a sketchbook in his lap, drawing sunflowers with exaggerated smiles and cartoon bees. Dr. Jalen had returned that morning, confirming Leo was improving, still weak, but out of danger. But the emotional toll still clung to the house like morning fog. Bailey signed the final page with a deep exhale. Gianni moved beside her, sliding the rest of the papers into a folder, sealing them with a crisp flick of his thumb. We'll take them to the clerk's office today, he said, and then we wait. Bailey nodded, voice soft. You make it sound so easy. He paused. It's not, but it's right. She looked up at him. You're not scared? He tilted his head. Of losing them? Of losing you? Every second. But I've learned something from these boys. Love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It just shows up. Bailey stood, walking to the window. The garden stretched wide and green, rows of tiny sprouts popping from the soil like secrets finally told. They've never had this, she said quietly. A home that didn't feel like it could disappear overnight. Gianni moved beside her, close but not crowding. Then let's make it permanent. The weight of his words settled gently between them. Later that afternoon they drove downtown, the boys in the back seat, Leo finally perking up enough to press his face to the window. "It's weird seeing you both dressed like lawyers." Johnny smiled. "This is what we call looking responsible." Mateo leaned forward. "Does this mean you're like our team now?" Bailey turned in her seat. "We've always been a team." Johnny added, "Now we're just putting it on paper." The clerk's office was small, quiet, with a smell of paper and lemon cleaner. A middle-aged woman behind the desk took their forms and nodded through each line. She didn't ask many questions, just stamped the documents one by one. As the final seal hit the page, Bailey's eyes welled. The woman looked up. "You're all set." Bailey whispered, "Thank you." Gianni gently placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the door as if the moment was heavier than gravity. Outside, the boys ran ahead toward the fountain in the center of the square, their laughter breaking the tension like sunlight after a storm. Bailey leaned against the railing, watching them. "You know," she said, "I never thought I'd sign my name to something that felt like hope." Gianni stood beside her. "It's more than hope." She turned to him, eyes soft. "It's you." He swallowed. "I'm not trying to replace anything." "I know," she said, "but you're adding something we didn't even know was missing." The silence between them grew warm, like the pause between heartbeats when everything is exactly where it should be. That evening, Miss Dottie baked too many muffins, claiming the oven was already warm, and there was no point letting it go to waste. Fatima showed up with sparkling cider and plastic cups, insisting on a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her cup, "and to those who stay when it's easier to leave." They clinked cups, laughter filling the kitchen. Later, after the guests had gone and the house settled, Bailey stepped into the greenhouse alone. The moonlight streamed in through the glass roof, catching the edges of the newly planted sunflower row. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the paper flower Leo had once tried to sell for a few dollars. The one that started it all. She placed it gently into a small glass frame and set it on the shelf above the potting bench. A soft knock at the door. She turned to see Gianni leaning in the doorway, hands tucked in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just, remembering." He stepped inside, slow, quiet, reverent. "This place has changed." "So have we." He looked at the frame, then back at her. "What now?" Bailey took a step closer. "Now we keep showing up." Gianni brushed a hand along her arm. "Every day?" She nodded. "Even the hard ones." He touched her cheek gently. "Especially the hard ones." They stood in the glow of moonlight and old glass in the middle of dirt and new life. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a question. It felt like a promise. The camera clicked, then again, and again. Leo blinked into the soft sunlight while Mateo leaned against Bailey's shoulder, squinting dramatically like he'd just walked off a movie set. Behind the lens, Miss Dottie laughed as she tried to get them all to sit still for just one more shot. "Keep that chin up, Gianni. You look like you're about to get audited," she teased. Gianni rolled his eyes and adjusted his grip on Bailey's waist. "Remind me why we're doing this again?" "Because," Bailey whispered near his ear, "the boys asked for a family picture, and because we never framed the moment we became one." Gianni's gaze drifted down to Leo, who was now holding the framed paper flower like a trophy, beaming with a mix of pride and something deeper. Peace. It caught him right in the chest. Miss Dottie lowered the camera, finally satisfied. "All right. That's the one." The boys scrambled off the porch steps and ran toward the garden. leaving the adults in the golden hush of late afternoon. Gianni turned to Bailey. That felt weirdly significant. She smiled. It was. He studied her for a long moment. You're glowing. It's the light, she deflected, cheeks pink. It's not. Bailey stepped down to the grass, her bare feet brushing over the soft blades. You ever think about how fast all this happened? Gianni followed her. Every day. And you're still here. He stopped walking, hands in his pockets. You thought I wouldn't be? She turned to face him. I hoped you would. That's different. He closed the distance between them slowly. Hope was enough to start. She held his gaze. And love? He paused. Love is what kept me going. Bailey's breath caught. Gianni didn't move any closer. He let the words settle in the space between them like petals on still water. You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever want again, he said. Not just a home, but the chance to build one. Bailey stepped forward, laying a hand gently on his chest. Then let's build it. From behind them, Leo called out, Come see what we planted. They turned to find the boys in the center of the garden, standing beside two small wooden signs they'd hammered into the ground. One said ours, the other said beginnings. Gianni reached for Bailey's hand, threading his fingers through hers. They walked together across the yard, past the rows of green that were growing taller now, roots deepening in ways that couldn't be undone. Matteo pointed to a cluster of bright orange zinnias. We named this row after Miss Dottie. She said she likes flowers with attitude. Bailey laughed. Sounds about right. And those, Leo added, pointing to a patch of pale blue forget-me-nots, are yours. Bailey knelt down. Why these? Because they look like tiny hopes, he said, like things you want to keep. She blinked against the sudden warmth in her eyes. You two are going to ruin me. Gianni crouched beside them. Too late for that. The sun dipped lower, brushing the edges of the greenhouse in soft amber light. Shadows stretched, but nothing felt dim. After dinner, they sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the boys chase fireflies through the yard. Bailey leaned into Gianni's side, her head resting just beneath his shoulder. I got an email from the adoption attorney today, he said quietly. She turned her head. Yeah? He said we're through the final review. If everything clears by Friday, we'll have full guardianship. Bailey sucked in a breath. So soon? Gianni nodded. It's happening, Bailey. She closed her eyes for a moment, then looked up at him. You still sure? He pulled her hand into his lap, holding it tight. I've never been more sure of anything. Her voice dropped. I used to dream about this kind of life. Then I stopped letting myself want it. It felt cruel to ask for something that perfect. It's not perfect, he said, but it's real, and that makes it better. She smiled. Gianni reached into his coat pocket, pulled something out, and placed it gently into her hand. It was a ring, simple, elegant, a band with a tiny flower etched into the gold. Bailey stared at it, breath stolen. I don't have a speech, Gianni murmured. Just a question. Her eyes lifted to his. If we're already building a life together, he said, will you let me keep building it with you? Not just as a father, but as your partner, your husband. Bailey blinked once, twice, then whispered, yes. Not rushed, not uncertain. Just, yes. She slipped the ring on slowly, and it fit like it had been waiting for her hand all along. The boys were still chasing light in the garden, but Bailey and Gianni, framed in the glow of porch light and new promises, stood in something softer, steadier, not the start of a fairy tale, the middle of something lasting. The day the papers arrived, the sky was silver and still, a quiet that felt intentional. like even the weather knew something sacred was about to be sealed. The envelope was thick, official, stamped with a raised seal that glinted faintly in the soft morning light. Gianni stared at it on the counter for a moment before touching it. His hands, always steady, hesitated. Bailey stood nearby, watching him. Her breath caught when his fingers finally slid beneath the flap and pulled the documents free. He read silently at first, then looked up. "They're ours," he said softly. Bailey didn't respond. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears slipped free before she could stop them. Her knees buckled just slightly, and Gianni caught her before she even realized she was falling into him. She pressed her forehead to his chest, breath shaking. "We did it?" He wrapped his arms around her, grounding her with the kind of warmth that didn't ask for permission. "We did." From the hallway, the boys' voices rose, arguing about who got the last blueberry muffin. Typical. Perfect. Bailey pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. "You're sure we're ready?" Gianni smiled. "We already are." They called the boys into the kitchen. Matteo came first, one sock missing, hair wild from sleep. Leo followed, more serious, cautious even now. Bailey crouched down to their level. "We need to tell you something important." Gianni joined her, one hand resting on Leo's shoulder. "The court made it official. We're your legal guardians now." Matteo blinked. "Like, for real?" Bailey nodded, voice barely holding. "Forever real." Leo looked between them. "So no one can take us?" "No one," Gianni said, steady and clear. "You're home." Silence. Then Matteo launched himself into Gianni's arms, wrapping around his neck with all the force his small frame could muster. Leo leaned into Bailey, quiet tears sliding down his cheeks. She whispered into his hair, "You're safe now, baby. We're not going anywhere." Later, the house swelled with life. Fatima brought balloons and homemade peach cobbler, swearing she wouldn't cry and doing exactly that. Miss Dottie pinned the signed court order to the fridge like it was a child's report card, proud and front and center. Dr. Jalen stopped by after clinic hours with a new growth chart and a box of books for the boys, casually slipping Bailey a vitamin refill like she hadn't just cleared the biggest emotional milestone of her life. And through it all, Gianni watched Bailey. She moved through the house like someone reborn, not frantic or unsure, but calm, lit from the inside. There were still shadows in her. Grief never leaves entirely, but now it had somewhere soft to rest. That night the porch lights glowed soft and amber, casting halos onto the garden below. Gianni stood barefoot near the greenhouse, sipping tea, eyes tracing the new growth that had begun to bloom under the boys' care. The paper flower from that very first day, now framed in the greenhouse backlit by string lights, sat like a relic, a reminder of how far they'd come. Bailey joined him, blanket over her shoulders, hair loose around her face. "You're quiet," she said. He looked at her. "I keep thinking about the moment I saw them in the park, selling flowers, just trying to survive." Bailey stepped closer. "And now look. They're not just surviving anymore," Gianni said. "They're blooming." She smiled. "So are you." He turned toward her, slow and full of something unspoken. "Bailey," he said, voice low, "we've filed the papers. We've made this family whole, but there's still one promise I haven't asked you to make." She studied his face. "You don't need a promise to stay." "No," he said, taking her hand, "but I want one for forever." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a second ring, smaller, delicate, a single engraved sunflower at its center. Bailey blinked, heart suddenly loud in her ears. "You already proposed." "I asked for a life with you," he said, "but I haven't asked for your heart on paper yet." Her voice cracked. "You want to set a date?" He nodded. "Tomorrow, next month, a year from now. Just tell me when you're ready." She looked down at the ring, then up into his eyes. "You sure?" "I'm not just sure," he said. "I'm all in." Bailey laughed, breathless, her hand shaking as she took the ring. "Then let's plan it. Not someday. Soon. Before the season changes. Before life gets busy again." Gianni smiled, pulling her in. "We'll keep it simple," she whispered. "Family, flowers, a table full of people who've seen the worst of us and still stayed." He nodded. "That sounds perfect." She looked up. "This time next month?" He kissed her forehead. "I'll be there." And as they stood in the garden, surrounded by the sound of crickets and the scent of summer soil, Bailey felt it. For the first time in years, the ground beneath her wasn't shifting. It was solid, and everything that had once felt fragile now bloomed with quiet, unwavering strength. The morning of the wedding was wrapped in soft light and the scent of lemon blossoms. The greenhouse, once abandoned and silent, was now filled with laughter, flower petals, and the low hum of quiet anticipation. Bailey stood barefoot on the greenhouse stone floor, sunlight spilling through the glass panes in long golden strokes. Fatima fussed with the hem of her simple ivory dress, which flowed like it had been made from the breeze itself. Miss Dottie stood nearby with a corsage in hand, shaking her head. "You know," Dottie said, eyes misty, "you were half dead when you walked through that gate. Now look at you, glowing like a June sunrise." Bailey laughed softly. "I still wake up some mornings and wonder if any of this is real." Fatima stepped back, tilting her head as she admired her friend. "It's real, because you stayed long enough to let it become real." The boys peeked through the greenhouse door, Leo tugging at the sleeves of his tiny blazer, Mateo carrying a basket of sunflower petals like it was made of glass. "Are we ready yet?" Mateo whispered. Bailey crouched down, gathering them into her arms. "Almost, but I want you both to know something first." They stilled, leaning in. "You are the reason we're here," she said. "You are the beginning of everything that matters. This day, it's not just mine and Gianni's. It's yours too." Leo blinked, his voice small. "Are we a real family now?" Bailey nodded, brushing her hand through his curls. "We've been one. Today just puts a ribbon on it." The ceremony was held just outside the greenhouse, under the old oak tree where paper lanterns swayed in the breeze, and rows of wooden chairs lined the path. The garden, once wild, now tenderly tended, was in full bloom. Zinnias, lavender, sunflowers, jasmine. It smelled like forgiveness, like a second chance. Gianni stood at the end of the aisle in a slate gray suit, no tie, hands clasped in front of him. His breath hitched as Bailey stepped into view. Everything else fell away. She moved slowly, her eyes never leaving his. The boys walked ahead, scattering petals and stealing glances over their shoulders to make sure she was still following. She was. When she reached him, Gianni took her hand, holding it like it was the one thing keeping him steady. The officiant spoke, but Bailey barely heard the words. She only heard the quiet rhythm of Gianni's breathing, saw the shine in his eyes, felt the warmth of his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist. Gianni's vows were simple, honest. "You didn't just walk into my life, Bailey. You cracked it open. You and those boys reminded me what it means to care, to stay, to build something real, and I will spend every day showing you that love doesn't leave." Bailey's voice trembled when it was her turn. "I thought I was too tired to try again. I thought the world had taken everything from me. But then a stranger bought a paper flower, and everything changed. You gave me space to heal, to hope. I don't need perfect. I just need you exactly as you are, and I'll choose you in every version of our story." They kissed beneath the branches, the greenhouse behind them, the sky wide and open above. Applause rose. Laughter followed. The reception wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. A long table stretched across the garden, covered in mismatched plates and linen napkins. Miss Dottie's peach pie sat proudly in the center beside a stack of teacups and lemon cake. There were no speeches, just toasts made between bites, and music hummed through a borrowed speaker. At sunset, Johnny found Bailey sitting on the swing beneath the tree, her heels tossed aside, toes grazing the grass. He slid beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You okay, Mrs. Whitaker?" She smiled at the sound of it. Tired, grateful, happy, all at once. He leaned his head against hers. "That sounds about right." They watched the boys run through the garden, Leo chasing Mateo with a ribbon streamer in his hand, their laughter ringing like wind chimes. Bailey exhaled. "I used to think the hardest part of life was the waiting. And now? Now I know it's the staying." Gianni turned to her. "You stayed." "So did you." They sat in silence for a while, until the stars came out one by one, and the lanterns began to glow a little brighter. Eventually, Leo returned and crawled into Bailey's lap, resting his head against her chest. Mateo curled against Gianni's side. They didn't speak, just settled in, 4 hearts beating in a rhythm that finally felt whole. The paper flower, now preserved in a shadow box that hung in the greenhouse, glowed faintly under the soft string lights. It wasn't just a memory. It was the moment everything began. And now, in the stillness of their forever, it bloomed quietly beside them. A reminder that love, once planted, never stops growing. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way.